Someone earning $138,000 a year just postponed a dental crown because the checking account could not absorb $680 this month. Someone earning $71,000 a year scheduled theirs without hesitation. Same procedure, same city, same insurance plan. The person who earns almost double is the one who delayed. And once you understand why, you will never think about salary the same way again. There is a number where financial stress stops being the background noise of your life. Not a number from a viral headline. Not the $75,000 that the internet has been recycling from a study most people never actually read. A real number. A number you can calculate for your own household tonight, on a napkin with no spreadsheet and no financial advisor. That number for the average American household in 2026 lands somewhere around $100,000 in total household income. But here is the part that changes everything. It is not $100,000 because $100,000 is a lot of money. It is $100,000 because that is roughly where the gap between what life costs and what you earn finally opens wide enough for a dental bill, a flat tire, or a bad month to pass through without turning into debt. That gap has a name. It is called margin. And margin is the only thing that separates the person who sleeps fine from the person who checks the banking app before authorizing a repair. Stress does not leave your life at a salary. It leaves your life at a margin. The person who postponed the crown, I will call her Dana, 36, marketing manager in Charlotte, North Carolina. Household income, $138,000. On paper, she cleared the threshold a long time ago. But when the household income crossed six figures, the apartment became a house at $2,400 a month. The used car became two financed cars at a combined $1,300 a month. The public preschool waitlist became private daycare at $1,200 a month. Add health insurance, utilities, groceries, and the car insurance that jumped 16% in 2 years, and Dana's fixed monthly costs now run about $7,200. Her margin in a good month is $200. In a bad month, it is negative. She earns $138,000 and she has less breathing room than the guy who earns $71,000. That guy is Marcus, 34, logistics analyst in Columbus, Ohio. He and his wife rent a 2-bedroom apartment for $1,350 a month. They drive one used car that is paid off. Their monthly fixed costs sit around $3,800. And what is left over, about $600 to $800 a month, is not a fortune. But it is real. It is not already assigned to a car payment, or a daycare invoice, or a mortgage that felt responsible when the interest rate was lower. That $600 to $800 is why Marcus does not flinch at the dentist. It is not confidence. It is math. And that is the thing this video is actually about. Not how much you need to earn. How much of what you earn needs to survive the month without a claim on it? Because right now, in the American economy of 2026, the average household is spending over $5,300 a month before a single discretionary dollar gets touched. Housing takes roughly a third of the median income. Transportation, meaning the car payment, the insurance, the gas, and the maintenance combined, takes another 17%. Food takes 13%. Healthcare takes 8%. Personal insurance and retirement contributions take 12%. Add those up, and over 80% of the average household's income is locked into categories that do not feel like choices. They feel like invoices. So the real question is not whether $100,000 is enough. The real question is what your fixed costs have already done to it before you wake up on Monday morning. For the bottom 60% of American households, the answer is ugly. A joint analysis from the Bureau of Labor Statistics and the Bureau of Economic Analysis found that the bottom 3 income quintiles in the United States have negative personal savings. Not low, negative. They are spending more than they earn. The margin is not thin. it is underwater. And that pattern does not stop at the poverty line. It reaches deep into what most people would call middle class. Now, I want to be direct. If you are earning $30,000 or $40,000 and the rent alone is swallowing half your paycheck, this video is not going to tell you the problem is your coffee order. At that level, the math is not a behavior problem. It is a structural problem. The cost of being alive in this country has risen roughly 30% since 2019, and wages for most workers did not keep up. That is not a character flaw. That is arithmetic. But what this video will show you, whether you earn $40,000 or $140,000, is the mechanism that determines whether a paycheck creates stability or just creates a bigger version of the same stress. Because both outcomes happen every day. And they happen for reasons you can measure, trace, and change. Over the next 40 minutes, we are going to do something almost no one does with this question. We are going to build the actual number from the ground up, not from a happiness study, not from a round number someone picked to make a headline. From your real costs, the real structure of American household spending in 2026, and the real math behind what it takes for margin to exist. I am going to show you why the most repeated research on money and happiness is both true and dangerously incomplete. Why a study of more than 2 million Americans found that stress actually starts climbing again once income passes a certain point, and why that finding is not what you think it means. Why Dana, earning $138,000, lives with more financial anxiety than Marcus at 71. And what the people who actually reached the calm side of the threshold did that Dana has not done yet. Let us start with the stack that eats your paycheck before you touch it. Because once you see how the stack works, once you see exactly where each dollar goes, and which costs are fixed, and which ones only feel fixed, the number stops being abstract. It becomes personal. And for a lot of people watching this, it will be smaller than you expect. Not because life is cheap, because the margin you actually need to stop the stress is not a lifestyle upgrade. It is a buffer, a real one. The kind that turns a $680 dental bill from a crisis into a Tuesday. And that difference between crisis and Tuesday is the entire game. The stack is not complicated. That is what makes it dangerous. Every piece of it looks reasonable on its own. It is the total that creates the trap. Start with housing. The biggest single cost for almost every American household, and the one that has moved the most in the last 5 years. The Atlanta Federal Reserve tracks something called the Home Ownership Affordability Monitor. It measures what share of the median household income it takes to own the median-priced home. As of mid-2025, that number was 47.7%, not 30%, not the old guideline that real estate agents use to quote, nearly half of the median income consumed by one line item. And that is for buyers. Renters are not escaping it either. Rents have climbed to the point where only 3 large metro areas in the entire country still allow the typical household to keep housing costs under the 30% threshold. Pittsburgh, Detroit, St. Louis. Everywhere else, you are above the line. In Los Angeles, the median-priced home would require more than 100% of the area's median income, meaning the average household there cannot afford it, even if they spend nothing else. The 30% rule is not a rule anymore. It is a memory. Now add transportation. The average monthly payment on a new car in the fourth quarter of 2025 was $767. Used cars averaged $537, and nearly 1 in 5 new car loans now carries a payment above $1,000 a month. Those are not luxury vehicles. Almost 3/4 of those $1,000-plus payments are on non-luxury models, pickup trucks, SUVs, the kind of vehicles people buy because they have kids or a commute or a job that requires hauling. Practical purchases with impractical price tags. And the car payment is only part of the cost. Auto insurance premiums have risen 16% in just 2 years. The national average is now about $194 a month. In some states, drivers with poor credit are paying north of $600 a month just for coverage. The Department of Transportation estimates the total annual cost of owning and operating a vehicle at over $12,000. In 4 states, the car payment plus insurance alone exceeds $1,000 a month. Marcus drives a used car that is paid off. His total transportation cost, insurance, gas, and maintenance runs around $400 a month. Dana has 2 financed vehicles. Her combined transportation cost is closer to $1,600. The gap between their transportation spending is $1,200 a month. That single category, by itself, explains more than half the difference in their margins. Now add food. The average household spends roughly $790 a month on groceries and eating out. This number has climbed significantly since 2019, and it does not scale down easily. You can optimize it. You cannot eliminate it. Add healthcare. The average household spends about $486 a month. Employer-sponsored health insurance premiums have been rising 6 to 7% per year. And for households buying coverage on the Affordable Care Act marketplace, the expiration of enhanced premium tax credits has roughly doubled average out-of-pocket premiums heading into 2026. A family that was paying $74 a month for a subsidized plan may now be looking at over $150 or more. Add utilities. The average American household now pays about $265 a month, up 12% from the prior year. Energy rate increases hit more than 120 million Americans in 2025 alone. Add personal insurance and retirement contributions. About 12% of the average household budget goes to things like life insurance, disability, and whatever small percentage is being directed toward a 401k or IRA. For most people in the bottom 3 quintiles, this number is minimal because there is nothing left to contribute. Now, total it up. Housing, transportation, food, healthcare, utilities, insurance, and retirement. For the average American household, those categories alone consume over 80% of income. The Bureau of Labor Statistics. Consumer Expenditure Survey puts total average household spending at about $73,000 a year, or roughly $6,000 a month. And median household income sits at $83,730 before taxes. After federal and state taxes, the take-home for that household is closer to $65,000, meaning the average spending nearly matches or exceeds the median take-home pay. That is why the margin is negative for the bottom 60%. It is not because those households are irresponsible. It is because the cost of being a normal functioning American household in 2026 has outgrown the median income. So here is the first calculation that matters. Not a compound interest table. Not a retirement projection. Just the foundation. Take your monthly after-tax household income. Subtract your fixed monthly costs, housing, car, insurance, utilities, healthcare, groceries at your realistic level, not the aspirational budget you wrote once and never followed. Debt minimums, childcare if you have kids. What is left? If the number is 0 or negative, you do not have a spending problem. You have a margin problem. And no amount of discipline will fix a margin problem because there is nothing left for discipline to work with. If the number is between $100 and $300, you are technically positive but functionally fragile. 1 car repair, 1 medical copay, 1 insurance deductible, and the margin is gone. If the number is between $500 and $1,000, you are crossing into the zone where stress starts to quiet down. Not because life is easy. Because the ordinary surprises of life stop creating debt. The dental crown gets scheduled. The tire gets replaced. The washing machine breaks, and it is an inconvenience, not a crisis. Above $1,000 of monthly margin, the math starts compounding in your favor. Emergency savings fill. Retirement contributions happen. Options appear, not luxury options. Life options. The option to leave a job you hate. The option to move. The option to say no to a financial commitment that does not serve you. That is the threshold. Not a salary, a margin. And the margin that changes the emotional texture of daily life, for most households, starts somewhere around $500 a month and becomes stable around $1,000. Which brings us back to the original question. What salary produces that margin? If your fixed costs look like Marcus's, around $3,800 a month, the answer is surprisingly modest. A household income of about $70,000 after taxes produces enough margin to absorb normal life without borrowing against next month. That is not wealthy. That is stable. And stable is what most people actually mean when they say they want to stop being stressed about money. But if your fixed costs look like Dana's, around $7,200 a month, the answer is very different. Even at $138,000, the margin barely exists. And the reason is not that Dana earns too little. It is that every time the income went up, the cost structure went up with it. The raise did not create margin. It created a more expensive version of the same tightness. And that is the part no one warns you about. This is the part of the income conversation that almost every personal finance channel skips. Not because they do not know it, because it is uncomfortable. Because it means the answer to financial stress is not always earn more. Sometimes earning more is exactly what made the stress worse. Here is how the escalation works. You already know Dana's numbers. House, cars, daycare, insurance. Each decision defensible, none of them reckless. The problem was never any single line item. The problem was that every time the income grew, a new cost moved in before the margin could form. The raise arrived in January. By March, it had a name and an address and a monthly payment. And the part that never shows up on a balance sheet is what the escalation did to the ordinary moments. Dana told her husband she wanted to wait on the dental crown. He asked why. She did not say they could not afford it. She said it was not a good month. That phrase, not a good month, had become a permanent season. There was never a good month because every month was already full. The income was high. The schedule was packed. The margin was gone. And the feeling that crept in was not poverty. It was captivity. The sensation that everything is paid for, but nothing is flexible. That the household runs, but only if nothing unexpected happens. And something unexpected always happens. That is what the escalation costs. Not bankruptcy, not crisis. Just the slow, quiet disappearance of the ability to say yes without calculating first. This is what I mean when I say the threshold is not a salary. If Dana had kept her cost structure at the level it was before the income jumped, she would have a margin of over $2,000 a month. She would not check the app before the dentist. She would not calculate which week works better for a car repair. She would have options, not because she changed jobs, because she did not let the cost structure eat the raise. But she did, and in fairness, the entire economy is designed to make sure she does. The mortgage lender qualifies you at the higher income. The car dealer asks about monthly budget, not total cost. The daycare charges what the market will bear. Nobody in the system has an incentive to protect the margin. That is entirely on you. Now, there is a famous study that gets cited every time someone talks about income and happiness. You have probably heard some version of it. The original research, published in 2010, concluded that emotional well-being rises with income, but levels off somewhere around $75,000. That number has been repeated so many times it feels like scientific law. It is not. In 2023, the same researcher behind the original finding, Daniel Kahneman, teamed up with another researcher named Matthew Killingsworth to revisit the question. What they found was more nuanced than a headline allows. For most people, happiness keeps rising with income well past $100,000. There is no hard ceiling. The original flattening only appeared in the unhappiest 20% of the sample. For that group, more income stopped reducing misery somewhere around $100,000 in today's dollars. But for everyone else, the relationship kept going. So the internet was half right. There is a flattening, but only for the people who are already suffering the most. For the rest of the population, money keeps buying small but real increases in well-being. But here is where it gets genuinely interesting, and this is the part almost nobody covers. Happiness and stress are not the same dimension. You can be happier and more stressed at the same time. In a large-scale study published in 2025 drawing on responses from more than 2 million American adults collected through the Gallup Daily Poll, found exactly that. Life satisfaction keeps climbing with income, but stress, the day-to-day experience of feeling pressured and overwhelmed, follows a different curve. Stress decreases as income rises, but only up to a point. The researchers found a turning point somewhere around $63,000, which adjusted for inflation lands closer to $75,000 or $80,000 in today's economy. Below that point, more income means less stress. Above it, stress starts ticking back up. Now, that does not mean money makes you miserable. It means the type of stress changes. Below the threshold, the stress is about scarcity, not having enough, worrying about rent, dreading a medical bill, watching the checking account drain before the month ends. That kind of stress is relentless and corrosive, and it responds directly to more income. Above the threshold, the stress shifts. It becomes about time, about responsibility, about managing more complex financial obligations, about the performance pressure that comes with higher-earning jobs, about the lifestyle commitments that expanded alongside the salary, the mortgage that requires 2 incomes, the private school tuition that locks both parents into jobs they might otherwise leave, the car payments that add up to more than someone else's rent. The stress above the threshold is not about not having enough. It is about having plenty and still not feeling free. And that is the paradox this video is built around. The salary where stress stops is real, but most people overshoot it by earning more and spending more at the same speed, and they end up on the other side of the curve, where the stress is different but just as present. If this breakdown is making something click for you, this is the kind of analysis I publish every week on this channel. Hit subscribe if you want the mechanisms, not the slogans. The question now is what actually works. What do the people who crossed the threshold and stayed on the calm side do differently? Think about Dana for a moment. She does not worry about rent. She worries about whether both car payments, the mortgage, the daycare, and the quarterly insurance premium can all land in the same month without overdrawing the account. She does not skip meals. She skips the dentist. She does not feel poor. She feels locked. Every dollar has already been promised somewhere, and the feeling of having a high income with no flexibility is its own kind of stress. It is the stress of running fast on a treadmill that someone else set the speed on. Marcus does not run on that treadmill, not because he is smarter, because he never stepped on it. His income is modest. His cost structure is smaller. And the gap between the two, that $600 to $800 a month, gives him something Dana has not felt in years. Quiet. Not the quiet of wealth, the quiet of margin. It is not one big decision. It is 4 categories where the default quietly eats the margin. And the people who stay on the calm side of the threshold tend to do the same thing in all 4. They do not let the cost scale with the income. The first category is housing. This is the biggest lever and the hardest to move. The typical American household would need to spend nearly 48% of its income to buy a median-priced home right now. That is not a typo. That is the Atlanta Fed's most recent data. And it means that for most households, The old rule of keeping housing under 30% of income requires either earning well above the median or choosing a home well below the median price. The people who protect their margin tend to make one of three choices. They rent below their means until buying genuinely makes sense. They buy below what the lender approves them for, because the lender's math is based on what you can technically survive, not what preserves your margin. Or they stay in a home that is already paid for or nearly paid for, even when the neighborhood is not the one their coworkers brag about. Marcus rents for $1,350. In Columbus, Ohio, he could qualify for a mortgage payment closer to $2,000. He stays in the apartment, not because he cannot afford more, because the $700 of difference between what he pays and what he could pay is his margin. That is his dental crown. That is his car repair. That is the reason his wife does not calculate grocery totals in her head while walking through the store. Now, I can already hear the objection. Not everyone has the option to rent cheaper or buy smaller. If you are in a city where a studio apartment costs $2,000 a month, living below your means on housing might mean a 60-minute commute, or a neighborhood you do not feel safe in. That is real. And I am not going to pretend it is simple, but the principle still holds even when the geography is hard. The question is not whether you can get housing to 30%. The question is whether you are aware of exactly how much of your margin housing is consuming and whether there is any version of your housing situation that returns some of that margin without wrecking your life. Sometimes there is. Sometimes there is not. But you cannot make that call without running the number first. The second category is transportation. The average new car payment is $767 a month on a loan that lasts nearly 6 years, and close to 1 in 5 of those payments now exceeds $1,000, mostly for non-luxury trucks and SUVs. Tack on insurance at nearly $200 a month, and the total cost of owning a vehicle runs above $1,000 a month for a huge share of American households. The margin move is straightforward. Drive a reliable used car that is paid off or nearly paid off. The math is not subtle. If you redirect $750 a month, roughly the difference between a new car payment and the cost of maintaining a paid-off used car, into an index fund starting in your early 30s, at the market's long-run historical average of roughly 10% nominal, that becomes over $700,000 by the time you are 60. Use the more conservative inflation-adjusted figure, closer to 7%, and it is still north of $400,000. That is one car payment, redirected, for 30 years, $400,000 to $700,000. Nobody posts that decision on social media. Nobody takes a picture of the car they did not buy. But that invisible choice is doing more for their future than almost anything visible they could have purchased. The third category is lifestyle lock-in. This one is the most subtle. It is not a bill. It is a collection of small commitments that feel normal individually, but become fixed costs collectively. Streaming subscriptions, meal kit services, upgraded phone plans, kids' activities. Each one is $10, $30, $50, $100 a month. None of them feels like the problem. Together they might account for $300 to $500 a month of spending that is not essential but has become automatic. The people who protect their margin do not track every coffee. They run a seasonal audit on every automatic charge with one question. If this disappeared tomorrow, would I notice within a week? If the answer is no, it is not a priority. It is a default. The fourth category is the income upgrade trap. This one is the most important because it is the moment where the threshold gets crossed and then immediately uncrossed. A raise arrives, a promotion lands, the household income jumps by $10,000 or $15,000 a year, and within 6 months, the cost structure has absorbed the increase, not through one reckless decision, through a series of small upgrades that each feel earned, a nicer apartment, a newer car, A slightly better school or daycare, a few more dinners out because we have been working hard and we deserve it. The people who stay on the calm side of the threshold treat a raise differently. They do not ask what they can now afford. They ask what percentage of this increase goes directly to margin. The answer does not have to be 100%, but if it is 0%, the raise did not change anything. It just made the treadmill more expensive. A colleague of mine, I will call him Derek, he and his wife earned a combined $94,000 for several years. Their fixed costs sat around $4,000 a month, margin of about $800. Then a new job bumped the household income to $114,000, $20,000 more. Their first instinct was to move to a bigger place. They nearly signed a lease at $1,900 a month, up from $1,400. Instead, they stayed. They took $1,200 of the monthly after-tax increase and split it. Half went to a high-yield savings account until they had 4 months of expenses as a buffer. Half went to increasing their 401k contributions. A year later, Derek told me something I have never forgotten. He said the raise did not change what they bought. It changed how they slept. The dental appointments stopped being conversations. The car maintenance stopped being negotiations. A bad month stopped being a category of experience in their marriage. That is what margin buys, not things, quiet. And the compounding works both ways. When margin exists, the emergency fund fills, the credit card stops being the backup plan, the interest charges disappear, and each month the distance between the household and financial stress gets a little wider. When margin does not exist, the cycle runs in reverse. The emergency lands on plastic. The balance grows. The interest eats into next month, and the stress compounds just as reliably as the savings would have. Same income, different structures. One builds a buffer, the other builds a balance, and the part that should make you uncomfortable is that both people might be earning the exact same salary. The difference between them is not talent or luck or discipline with coffee. It is whether the raise went to margin or whether the raise went to the stack. That is the mechanism. That is the real answer to the question in the title. The salary where life stops being stressful is not a fixed line on a chart. It is the salary where the distance between income and fixed costs stays wide enough for life to pass through without creating debt. And now, having seen the stack, having seen how it assembles, having seen what protects the margin and what destroys it, there is one more thing to talk about. What the people who reached the calm side actually feel. Because it is not what you think. The people who reach the calm side do not describe it the way you would expect. They do not talk about feeling rich. They do not talk about buying something they always wanted. They do not even talk about money that much. What they describe almost always is the absence of a specific kind of thinking. They stopped doing math in the shower. They stopped mentally sorting which bills could wait. They stopped checking the banking app as a reflex before making a normal decision. They stopped treating a check engine light as a financial event. They stopped rehearsing conversations about money with their spouse before actually having them. It is not excitement. It is not celebration. It is the removal of a noise that had been running so long they forgot it was there. Marcus does not call himself financially free. He would probably laugh at the phrase. He rents an apartment. He drives a 12-year-old car. He does not have a brokerage account or a passive income stream or a 7-figure net worth goal. What Marcus has is the ability to sit in a dentist's chair and say yes without opening an app first. He has the ability to drive past a mechanic's shop without calculating whether this is the month he can afford an oil change and a brake inspection at the same time. He has the ability to walk through a grocery store and buy what his family needs instead of what the checking account allows. That is what the calm side feels like. Not abundance. Just enough room for ordinary life to happen without friction. And here is the part that should reframe everything you just watched. Dana's income is not the problem. Dana's income is nearly double the national median. By every traditional measure, Dana should be past the threshold. The reason she is not is that the threshold was never about the income. It was about the distance between the income and the commitments. And Dana closed that distance one reasonable decision at a time until the gap disappeared. But Dana's story does not have to end there. Imagine Dana does one thing differently this year. Not a dramatic overhaul, not a move to a cheaper city, not selling both cars, just one structural change. She refinances one of the two vehicles into a shorter-term loan that will be paid off in 18 months, instead of rolling into another 68-month note. When that payment disappears, $537 a month comes back, not to a vacation, not to a renovation, to the margin. $537 a month does not sound transformational, but add it to her existing $200 margin, and Dana now has $700 a month of breathing room. That is the zone where the stress curve bends. That is where the dental crown becomes a Tuesday instead of a negotiation. That is where a bad month stops being a category of experience in the household and starts being just a month. And if she holds that margin instead of upgrading into the next cost, something else starts to happen. The emergency fund fills in under a year. The credit card balance, if there is one, starts going down. The retirement contribution, which has been sitting at the company default for years, can finally go up, and the compounding that was working against her starts working for her. Not because she earned more, because she stopped letting the stack eat what she already earned. That is the answer to the question in the title. The exact salary where life quietly stops being stressful is not a number you find in a study or a chart or a headline. It is the number where your household income exceeds your fixed costs by enough margin that the ordinary emergencies of being alive stop generating debt. For many households, that margin starts to matter around $500 a month and becomes stable around $1,000. The salary that produces it depends entirely on your cost structure. For Marcus, it was $71,000. For Derek, it was $94,000. And then $114,000 when the raise went to margin instead of to the stack. For Dana, it was always within reach at $138,000. She just never experienced it because the structure expanded faster than the income. Stress does not leave your life at a salary. It leaves your life at a margin. So here is what I want you to do before you close this video. Tonight or tomorrow morning or whenever you have 10 minutes and a phone, open whatever you use to see your money. Banking app, spreadsheet, notebook. It does not matter. Write down your monthly after-tax household income. Then write down every fixed monthly cost. Rent or mortgage, car payment, insurance, utilities, phone, healthcare, groceries at the level you actually spend, not the number you wish were true. Childcare, if it applies, minimum debt payments. Subtract the second number from the first. That is your margin. That is the number that determines whether a $680 dental crown is a crisis or a Tuesday. Whether a car repair is a conversation or a decision. Whether a bad month is a financial event or just a bad month. If the margin is negative or close to zero, you now know exactly why the stress exists. And you know it is not about willpower or discipline or skipping coffee. It is about the structure, the stack, the fixed costs that assembled one responsible decision at a time until they consumed everything. If the margin is positive but small, protect it. Do not let the next raise close the gap. Do not let the lender or the dealer or the algorithm decide how much room your life gets to have. And if the margin is wide enough that you read this entire list and felt nothing, you are already on the calm side. You might not have noticed because the noise stopped so gradually that the silence felt normal. But that silence is the thing. That is what people are actually chasing when they chase a higher salary. Most of them do not need more income. They need more of their income to survive the month without a claim on it. One more thing. Everything in this video, the margin, the stack, the escalation trap, these are the symptoms. The system underneath them, the foundational money architecture that makes every rule in this video actually stick, that is a different conversation, a longer one. And if you want to understand why the margin holds for some people and collapses for others even when the numbers look similar, that conversation is the one to watch next. I built it as the financial foundation video for this channel, and it is the first chapter that makes everything you just watched click into place for good. The salary where life stops being stressful is real. But it was never really about the salary. It was always about what was left.